A young girl was visiting Edmonton, Alberta's Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village. For her, it was a giant playground. She ran towards one of the recreated farmhouses and peeked inside the window. A strange, translucent figure was moving through the house. At first, she was both scared and fascinated, until the mysterious figure started to approach her. Needless to say, she spent the remainder of her visit glued to her parents' side.
Just east of Edmonton, Alberta, sits the Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village, a perfect recreation of immigrant life at the turn of the century. Many of the buildings are authentic, moved here and painstakingly restored. Some carried more than just history, and the original residents may still linger on.
As a night watchman was making his rounds, he heard the sounds of a crying baby coming from Haverlick House. As he neared the house, he thought he saw shadows move across the window. Cautiously, he entered, following the sound of the crying. He saw a woman rocking an antique cradle. As he approached, she walked off into a nearby room. But when he looked inside, the room was empty and there was no other exit. He turned and saw the cradle rocking on its own and heard the sound of the crying echoing from the empty cradle. As he reached out to touch it, the crying ended and the cradle suddenly stopped. Many have reported seeing this vision of a young mother rocking the antique cradle and hearing the eerie sounds of a baby crying in the empty Haverlick House. The gift shop at the Ukrainian village has been the scene of many strange happenings. Although the building itself is new, it seems to have attracted a resident spirit from the past. As an employee was closing for the night, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. A shadowy figure stood at the window, staring into the shop. The figure seemed to vanish into thin air. Curious, she walked into the lobby. Even though she saw nothing, suddenly an invisible force brushed by, pushing her aside. Several nights later, she was alone, arranging figurines for display, when she heard the sound of footsteps in the room with her, but there was no one else there. As she approached the source of the footsteps, they ceased. Suddenly, she found herself face to face with the mysterious figure. Seconds later, the apparition vanished, but the sound of his footsteps continued. Again, she followed the sound into the museum area. There she saw a translucent figure walking away from her and directly through the wall. Recreating life in a turn-of-the-century village requires a dedicated staff. Another employee at the Ukrainian village was restoring a period farmhouse. The park was closed and she was working alone. It was difficult but satisfying work. She heard the sounds of hoofbeats and an approaching wagon. Inquisitively, she went outside. The employee saw a strange man standing there holding a team of horses, beckoning her to approach. He said nothing. Even more ominous was the eerily silent horses, and once again he beckoned for her to get into the wagon. She ran back to the farmhouse and grabbed her walkie-talkie. Bravely returning outside, she was shocked to find that the horses and the mysterious wagon master had vanished without a trace. To this day, she still wonders what would have happened had she accepted the ride. Many others have reported hearing similar sounds when the park was closed. The sightings of the phantom wagon master and the young mother rocking her cradle make one wonder if the recreation of this historic Ukrainian village is so realistic and true to life that it has drawn spirits from beyond the grave to a new home. One Halloween night, a radio station decided to stage a publicity stunt. The stunt was in keeping with the holiday theme. A member of the staff volunteered to spend the night in the allegedly haunted Firkins house. He was a skeptic and was sure that nothing would happen, but as it turned out, he was wrong. He took a quick tour of the house and decided to settle in, waiting to see if, in fact, any strange events were going to take place. On the table next to where he was sitting was a book on magic. As he picked it up and started to read, he felt as if he was no longer alone. He began to hear the sound of footsteps echoing through the house. Glimpsing the mysterious figure for a second time, he decided the radio station stunt was concluded.
The Firkins house sits in Alberta's Fort Edmonton Park, a place where original buildings have been moved and restored. But sometimes when you move buildings, certain things have a way of coming with them.
Fort Edmonton Park is Canada's largest living history museum. We depict 4 eras in time from 1846 at a Hudson's Bay fort and then on the streets of 1885, 1905, and 1920. We have historical interpreters in each of the buildings and they bring the park to life. So when you actually come into the park, you ride the train to the fort and then you experience each era and you have hands-on experiences and live life just as it would have been during those time periods.
The Firkins house is now a museum at Fort Edmonton Park, but prior to this, it had been a private home. When the previous owners bought the house, it included the entire estate and some unique personal possessions. The oddest being a ventriloquist dummy owned by a boy that had died there. This dummy seemed to have a will of its own, appearing in the strangest places. Much of the paranormal activity in the house occurs in the bedroom where the boy died. The dummy, among other items, had been kept in the house in memory of this unfortunate boy. The boy had fallen ill and was confined to his room. He spent his final days practicing magic and ventriloquism. Throughout the young boy's illness, his loving mother never left his side. Eventually, the boy succumbed to his illness, and he died with his mother at his side. Their spirits linger on in the house today. Another terrifying incident took place when the owner decided to redecorate the boy's room. As she climbed the stairs, she came face to face with a pale figure blocking her passage. Slowly, she made her way up to investigate. At first, the room seemed empty. Feeling that she was in physical danger from the spirit, the terrified woman chose to donate the house to Fort Edmonton Park. To this day, paranormal researchers flock to study the Firkins house.
I came here to the Firkins house at night to take some photographs. I felt a continuous sense of my every move being watched by someone. I took photos in the 2 bedrooms, and it definitely felt as if I was unwanted. Downstairs, I felt I was being watched, but not in general. More like someone was actually in the room with me. Outside, I took some shots, and there was this certain area on one side of the house that was much colder than even the air around it. And when I took a photograph of the window from the woman's bedroom, the light was on, and the curtain seemed to be pulled back. When I got the film developed, I was surprised by it. There were these strange balls of light in some of the rooms. It was as though the film somehow managed to capture the image of the spirits in this house. I will never forget the feeling of being watched from that upstairs window.
Even though the Firkins house has been uprooted from its original foundation, the spirits still feel it is their home. Consider this: the next time you're moving a house, you may be moving more than just plaster and nails. Peggy's Cove, which was named after the only survivor of a schooner that sank in 1800, is one of Canada's most popular tourist destinations, attracting numerous visitors looking to take in the scenic views. But sometimes the sights they see are not at all what they expected. Over thousands of years, the Atlantic Ocean has sculpted the rocks of Peggy's Cove, creating a truly beautiful landscape. It's no wonder a small fishing village of 6,000 receives tens of thousands of visitors passing through it yearly. And like many maritime villages, it too has its own legend. Peggy's Cove draws numerous sightseers, and frequently they see the completely unexpected. A picture-taking traveler was interrupted when he saw a woman standing dangerously near the edge of a rock. Seeing nothing but crashing waves beneath her, he called out to her, warning her of the potential danger. She simply seemed to ignore him. Heroically, the tourist ran to aid the woman in distress. But when he reached the top of the rock, the woman was gone, or so it seemed. The woman was standing where the tourist first saw the lady in blue. Many have had experiences with the Maritime's legendary Lady in Blue.
Peggy's Cove is a beautiful fishing village in Nova Scotia, where people from across Canada come to admire its beautiful lighthouse and majestic cliffs. However, this particular spot attracts not only tourists, but spirits as well.
Hi, my name is Valerie. I'm a resident of Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia. This is a very famous landmark, and it's very popular with tourists for its beauty, its lighthouse, and its ghost stories. The most famous of these ghost stories is the Lady in Blue.
A woman came to Peggy's Cove from Europe, leaving behind her 2 children. Settling near the village, she had hoped to earn enough money to transport her children to Canada. As she looked out over the ocean, her heart was breaking for her children. Her new husband joined her on the rocks, but sensed that something was wrong. He needed to attend to a task, so he asked his wife to wait for him. He could see that she was still upset, so he tried cheering her up. His clown-like act was selfless, particularly given the result, for in his attempt to cheer his wife, he inadvertently gave his own. The Lady in Blue was never seen alive after that day. She seemed to have vanished, as if her life were an apparition. Many speculate she was filled with guilt, that she felt responsible for her husband's death, and so took her own life.
I was walking on these very, very rocks. A friend and I were coming down, having a lovely chat and walking along. And we thought we heard something behind us. We turned around, but there was nothing there. So we turned around and continued our walk, and there she was, right in front of us. We didn't know what to do. We were sort of so taken aback, we weren't sure we were really seeing her. And then she just disappeared. So I believe in that legend.
On another occasion, a recreational fisherman had come to the very spot where this young woman's husband died so many years before. The fisherman was to meet a friend who was running late. He went to look for him, leaving his gear behind. When he returned, he found his gear was missing. Searching, he began to find strewn pieces of his equipment. Confused, he carried on, retrieving his scattered items. The fisherman eventually found his equipment, but in doing so, he also found the lady in blue, who apparently seemed vexed with him. Perhaps he reminded her of years long ago. Old buildings often make strange noises. Usually it's just the natural sounds of the building settling, but sometimes the noises are not always what they seem. A young actress who had performed at the Walker Theatre was to discover the theatre had a life of its own.
In its day, the Walker Theatre in Winnipeg, Manitoba, was the toast of the town. People loved this theatre, including the actors who performed here, such notables as Lawrence Irving and Mabel Hackney. The two performed here often, and may still appear to this day.
The Walker was built in 1906 and quickly became a social gathering place for Manitoba's upper crust. People traveled from all over to see the performances at the theatre. Many actors aspired to perform in this theatre. Two were fortunate enough to have many return engagements. Mabel Hackney and Lawrence Irving were a married acting duo who performed frequently at the Walker. It was a second home to them. They were never happier than when they were center stage at the Grand Old Walker. On the day of their last performance, they left the theatre and headed to Europe, where they planned to tour with another acting troupe. Mabel Hackney and Lawrence Irving never made it to Europe. The boat they were traveling on sank en route. They were lost at sea and presumed drowned, but their lives would never be forgotten. Many people say that their spirits live on in the Walker Theatre, often being seen in the auditorium and other areas of the building. In death, they have returned to the theater that brought them such joy in life. Here in the place that holds their fondest memories, they have found their eternal peace. Perhaps the plaque honoring them which hangs in the foyer may be yet another factor in the theater's continued haunting. These ghosts are welcome here. A young stagehand was attending to some custodial duties. He was focused and kept his mind on his work. He had no idea he was not alone. Responding to a noise he heard, he looked in the direction of the doorway. Instantly, he saw a figure, and just as quickly, it vanished. The stagehand returned to his work, but was unable to ignore the feeling of being watched.
Hi, my name's Ken Jackson. We're at the Walker Theatre in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and it supposedly has been haunted for the last, almost 100 years now. I know I've been here a few times where I've sat and watched shows by myself up in the first or second balcony, and, you know, it seems like sometimes after a show you almost hear applause.
Rehearsals are usually conducted to an empty house. However, as two local actors were to learn, this is not always the case. Hearing applause, they looked out into the theater, but were unable to see beyond the lights. When they reached the auditorium, for the briefest of moments, they saw an apparition of two figures, and then they vanished. In another incident, after a long rehearsal, one of the actors was taking a nap on the couch. A sudden and loud noise woke him. Focusing his eyes, he saw the chandelier swaying mysteriously. Mabel Hackney and Lawrence Irving have returned to spend eternity in their beloved theater. So the next time you take in a show at the Walker, the performers on stage may not be the only ones worth watching. This high-traffic area in Victoria, British Columbia is frequented by locals and tourists alike. A business owner was on his way to work. Everything appeared normal, like any other day, or so he thought. As he approached the building which housed his business, he heard an eerie jangling, as if someone was rattling chains. He looked around and saw nothing unusual. When he tried the door, it was locked, yet he was sure he had left it open. He heard the jangling again. This time, as he turned to look, he saw a ghostly figure running towards him. For this local entrepreneur, the day turned out to be anything but normal.
Bastion Square in Victoria, British Columbia is very old and very haunted. Now filled with cafes and boutiques, it was once the location of the jailhouse for the colony of Vancouver Island. The jailhouse has long since disappeared, but part of its tragic history lingers on.
Bastion Square is filled with nooks and crannies. One particular alleyway opens onto the main entrance of the square, another site of many mysterious encounters. A woman cut through the alley as she had done hundreds of times before, but on this occasion, when she entered the alley, an unsettling feeling came over her. An apparition appeared from nowhere, walking towards her. Frightened and not willing to risk going any further, she returned the way she came. Reaching the entrance to the square, once again she encountered the mysterious figure blocking her path. Completely consumed by fear, the woman fled, neither stopping nor looking back.
People walking through the alley, whether it's daytime or nighttime, whether it's stormy or quiet, hear things. Heavy, muffled footsteps walking behind them, as though men with boots are trudging deliberately, following them, sometimes with the sound of rattling chains as well, dragging along the ground.
Bastion Square is a place where many tour groups are taken to learn about Victoria's diverse history. One evening, a tourist separated from his group, a decision that, in retrospect, should have been given further consideration. The man had discovered that the stories of Bastion Square were true.
Merchants who work in Bastion Square many years ago began noticing people running out of the alley, and the merchants began to gather the stories, and slowly but surely these stories began to materialize into a bigger picture, a picture that dates back to the colonial days in Victoria, when a jail stood just here as part of Bastion Square. It's been gone since 1885, and yet some of the prisoners from that jail undoubtedly are still here.
Another alley was the place where many past prisoners were cruelly and unjustly punished. Prison guards often became judge, jury, and executioner. This alley leads right into the center of the square and is often used as a shortcut. A young woman was taking the quick route to the square when she heard someone behind her. She saw a glimpse of a man in a prison uniform, so she looked back for a second glance. This translucent figure raced towards her. The woman fled, not stopping until she was in the safety of the square. Although Vancouver's historic jailhouse is gone, prisoners of the past seem condemned to serving their sentences in the nooks and crannies of Bastion Square forever.
The most pivotal moments of our lives often revolve around the church, from christening to marriage and ultimately death. But after death, could spirits still seek that sanctuary that was so important in life? Quebec City's Cathedral of the Holy Trinity may have just such a ghost, a lost soul searching for forgiveness.
We're standing outside the Cathedral of the Holy Trinity, which is one of the stories that we featured on our tour here in Quebec City. It wasn't just from one source. I had multiple people from the community talking about the goings-on at this church. I know that my first encounter with this shadowy figure, it was the first time I had a group of tourists in front of me and I was explaining the story, and I saw the figure up on the second floor balcony. And because I had children on my tour, I didn't want to let them know what I was watching. And when you've learned this text so well, it just comes out of your mouth automatically. And I stood there and I literally had sweat pouring down from underneath my hat, trying not to look frightened, but my heart was absolutely pounding and I couldn't get out of that church fast enough.
Another guide on the Quebec Ghost Tour had an unnerving encounter. As she was giving her presentation to a group of tourists, she had the strange sensation of being watched, as if there was an unseen presence. Finishing the presentation, she picked up her lantern. Realizing it was no longer lit, she opened it, only to discover that the entire candle and holder had vanished. A tourist approached her, and claimed he had seen a shadowy figure hovering near the lamp as she was speaking. This was one of several encounters with the spirit of the cathedral.
The hauntings on this church are going on a regular basis, again, not just with ourselves, but our tourists have experienced it, as well as the organists that have worked in this church.
Many speculate as to who this mysterious figure could be. There are two theories. One that she was a woman named Iris Dillon who lived near the cathedral during a cholera epidemic which swept through Quebec City in the 1800s. Iris barricaded herself in her house. She suffered from a condition we now know as narcolepsy, which draws its victims into death-like trances. As terrified as she was of being exposed to cholera, she was more terrified of being mistaken for one of its victims. Her greatest fear was to be buried alive. Tragically, Iris did fall into a deep narcoleptic stupor, and as she lay seemingly dead, a concerned neighbor entered the house. He mistook her condition, and that very day, Iris Dillon was buried alive at the Cathedral of the Holy Trinity. Some 50 years later, a workman outside the cathedral made an astonishing find. During construction, he uncovered a set of human remains. Many believe those remains to be the body of Iris Dillon. The second theory revolves around a woman who gave birth out of wedlock. In the 1860s, this would have resulted in both her and the newborn becoming outcasts in society. Fearing this, the woman made a horrible and devastating choice. Having nowhere to turn and no one to turn to, she took the dead infant into the cathedral during the night. Ashamed of what she had done, she carried the child's body downstairs and buried it in the basement. Entombed beneath the cathedral lay the bodies of former bishops of the Anglican Church. But under this very organ, where many have witnessed the ghostly apparition, is a small unmarked grave, wherein it is believed is buried the body of her dead infant. Some say the woman haunts this place to watch over the murdered child, while others believe she is here seeking forgiveness for her terrible deed. So much attention has been paid to life after death here that when visiting, you may encounter living proof. Alberta's Crow's Nest Pass is a place of breathtaking beauty, but is the scene of one of the great natural disasters in North American history. An archaeologist had traveled to the Crow's Nest Pass to study the site of the Frank Slide, the largest ever rock avalanche which killed 130 people. Looking for remnants and artifacts, the archaeologist felt as if someone was watching him. Soon, he made a fascinating but eerie discovery: the visible remains of one of the town's former residents. And again, the feeling of being watched came over him. As night fell in the Crow's Nest Pass, he decided to make camp and study his findings for the day. As he worked, he suddenly felt as if he was not alone. He looked up to find a menacing figure wielding a pickaxe staring back at him. More figures began to appear on the ridgeline, and then just as quickly, they disappeared into the darkness. Suddenly, he was again all alone at the scene of the Frank Slide.
Many feel that a ghost is the result of a life brutally ended without warning. Lost and confused, these spirits may be glimpsed at the scene of their deaths. In Alberta's Crow's Nest Pass, not one person, but an entire town's population was killed in seconds, and many still glimpse these victims at Frank Slide Rocks.
The area where the Frank Slide occurred is beautiful, but unsettling. Beneath the shadow of Turtle Mountain still lay the bodies of many of the unfortunate victims of the disaster.
I'm here at the Frank Slide Interpretive Center. My name is Kathy Pizzoni. I'm the program coordinator here. Frank was one of the very first coal mining towns that was established in this part of Western Canada. It was a rough and tumble type of place. Most of the people that lived there were immigrants, particularly young men that had come from all over the world to find a new life. Most of them wanted to be ranchers and ended up working in the coal mines. Some families had started moving into the area, and it was starting to become quite a thriving little community as well. On April the 29th, 1903, 90 million tons of limestone came off the eastern face of Turtle Mountain in the small mining community of Frank. It partially buried the mining community that lay at the base of Turtle Mountain. Approximately 76 people were killed in the landslide, making it the deadliest landslide in North American history. Most of the people that were killed in the 1903 Frank Slide were never recovered. So the slide itself is like a large monument, a memorial to those people. Some people have mentioned that they felt like they felt somebody passing them, particularly along what we call the Old Frank Road, which is down where most of the homes were that were buried in the 1903 Frank Slide. They feel a sense of somebody being there, or a sense of a tragic loss. People are amazed when they come to see the Frank Slide. The area here, particularly what I noticed that fascinates them, is the absolute power of Mother Nature. The rocks were traveling at speeds of up to 120 kilometers an hour. It wiped out the part of town that it buried within seconds and obliterated 76 lives just almost instantly. That kind of power amazes people, and when they see the depth of the rock and the area that it covered, it just fascinates them.
There is another, more personal ghost story that originates back in the town of Frank's mining heyday. It revolves around a young prostitute named Monty Lewis. Monty was very proud of her beauty and enjoyed taunting the local wives with tales of scandal about their husbands. She was also proud of the jewelry she wore. She was involved with a local miner, but their relationship was a stormy one. He was down on his luck and had been living off Monty's earnings, but his debt still grew. He wanted to pawn Monty's jewelry, but to her, vanity was more important than love. It is believed that in a fit of anger, he stabbed her 17 times. When Monty's body was found, her beloved jewelry was missing, along with her former lover. Since that day, people reported seeing a woman walking the streets of Frank, screaming as if she were in pain. Now that the town of Frank is gone, that screaming is heard among the rocks near Turtle Mountain, where the town once stood. the beautiful area around Frank Slide Rocks is popular among hikers and outdoorsmen. One young man made the unwise decision to climb Turtle Mountain alone with night approaching. His climb was successful, but as night fell, he found himself trapped at the summit with neither food or equipment. Shivering, he cried out for help to anyone who would hear him. His cries were indeed answered, not by anyone offering to help, but by an eerie, wailing figure standing on the rocks above him. Again, the hiker yelled into the darkness for help, but heard nothing in return, except the chilling sound of a woman wailing in agony. In spite of the darkness, the young man chose to make his way down Turtle Mountain. He would never forget the horrifying sounds he heard echoing through the mountains. Some claim the strange sound is nothing more than the wind rustling over the mountainside, but others swear it is Monty Lewis still crying out for justice. Frank Slide Rocks in Alberta is not just a tale of ghosts, but one of courage and the strength of human will. Seeing firsthand this devastating slide is overwhelming, especially when considering those who seem unable to leave. One of the most fascinating and eerie locations in St. John's, Newfoundland, is the Newman Wine Vault, now a provincial historic site and a museum open to the public. During its heyday in the late 19th century, two employees decided to mark the end of a long day with a few glasses of Newman's famous port, which was strictly forbidden. They had found an unmarked barrel, and assuming it would not be as easily missed, began to pry it open. The moment they did, an unearthly moaning began to echo through the tunnels of the wine vault. The two convinced themselves it was the wind. They began to share their first glass of port, but the moaning continued. They decided to investigate, concerned that there could be someone else in the wine vault that might report their impromptu celebration. They searched the catacombs, but found they were in fact all alone. They decided it was safe to return to their barrel of port. One drink had turned into 5, and they were beginning to feel the effects. Reaching in for yet another glassful, they discovered a large obstruction in the barrel. As they shook the cask, the strange moaning once again echoed through the wine vault. One of the men reached into the barrel to remove the blockage. Apparently, one of Newman's employees had died aboard a ship en route from England to Newfoundland, and during the voyage, his body had been preserved in an unmarked barrel of Newman's port.
For more than a century, the Newman Wine Vault in St. John's, Newfoundland, has been the birthplace of many ghostly legends. Some of these stories are frightening, and others are simply bizarre. Either way, the wine vaults with their dark catacombs and musty barrels are a natural place for tales of the supernatural.
Newfoundland certainly has a great tradition of folklore and a long, long history of ghost stories and folk beliefs and superstitions. The Newmans certainly are a fairly well-known family in the history of Newfoundland, and they were a company that seemed to attract a lot of folklore. There's a lot of different stories that became attached to the Newman family over the years, such as bodies in barrels and all sorts of strange happenings.
The Newman wine vault's first recorded sighting of a ghost occurred in the late 19th century. In a rarely used area of the vault, an employee was terrified by the vision of a dark-skinned woman. She stared at him with a forlorn expression. As she slowly approached him, she revealed her shackled hands. The employee ran to Mr. Newman, who decided to investigate the strange apparition. He entered the unused part of the wine vault and discovered a room full of long-forgotten cargo pulled from an old freighter run. In a musty barrel, he uncovered an intricately carved wooden box filled with bones. On closer inspection, they realized the bones were human. There was a bundle of fine red silk from the West Indies. Beneath the silk lay a pair of shackles, the kind used on slave ships. But most horrifying of all was a human skull. Newman gathered the ghoulish remains to arrange a proper burial for this forgotten soul. Clearly, one of the charter ships used by Newman's company had been supplementing their income by trafficking in slaves. The spirit of the shackled woman was no longer seen walking the halls of the wine vault, and perhaps being given a proper burial finally allowed her to find peace. She did, however, make one final appearance, not in reality, but in one of Newman's dreams. He dreamt of walking through the wine vault and encountering this mysterious woman. She beckoned him closer, and though her lips never moved, he could clearly hear her voice in his mind. She warned him of trouble that would befall a ship and its cargo of port. The cargo had been sent out uninsured, and its loss would bankrupt Newman. She left him alone and shaken. The moment Newman awoke, he insured his cargo. The vessel in question never did reach its destination. It was believed to have sunk en route to England. The spirit that Newman helped to find her peace may have returned the favor by saving the Newman Wine Company. Another strange tale concerned a ship carrying molasses, which mysteriously caught fire and ran aground in St. John's. The cargo was offloaded into a warehouse, which also inexplicably burnt to the ground. Rumors began to circulate that the shipment was cursed, and Newman decided to take his portion of the cargo and have it thrown into the bay. As the barrels were being removed from the vault, Newman noticed that a small cask was partially opened. The barrel was not filled with molasses. Inside were the ancient mummified remains of an infant. Newman carefully removed the tiny body from the barrel. He was unsure if the child had been murdered or if this was some treasured artifact stolen from the West Indies or Africa. He wrapped up the body and made arrangements with a local church for a proper burial, after which the strange occurrences surrounding the shipment ceased and there were no more fires. But there have always been unexplainable events at the Newman wine vaults. Though some tales about Newfoundland's Newman wine vault may be urban legends, documented history proves that others are based in fact. Whatever the truth may be, these eerie stories of ghosts and misplaced corpses are perfect for late-night retelling over a glass of port. Thunder Bay's Trowbridge Falls are a pristine natural environment, but the area is also the location of many unnatural occurrences. A visitor came to the park to enjoy a summer hike. As he walked on, he heard what sounded like footsteps behind him. Suddenly, someone pushed him. Just as he was regaining his balance, another push almost knocked him over. When he looked around, no one was there. Slowly, he continued his walk until he saw two apparitions firmly blocking his path. The frightened visitor did not hesitate. He ran away as quickly as he could.
Trowbridge Falls was formed over 10,000 years ago from the melting ice caps in Minnesota. Today, this picturesque wonder of nature is part of a provincial park in Thunder Bay, Ontario. The park is an attraction to outdoor enthusiasts, thrill seekers, and paranormal researchers.
This location has become a popular destination for risk takers, a place to tempt fate for the sheer thrill and rush of excitement. Some gather here as part of adolescent initiations. They bolster their courage and jump from the highest point, diving into the beckoning waters below. Others congregate here not to tempt fate, but to succumb to it. A place where life and death converge. Many bodies have washed up on these shores, blatant reminders of life's fragile nature. Perhaps it is these fallen souls who have contributed to the spiritual activity in this area today. However, this site, as beautiful as it is, has a harsh reputation as well. Trowbridge Falls has claimed the lives and souls of numerous people.
Last year, we did have a death up here in the park. There have been other deaths with the river, with drownings and stuff. So who knows, maybe there are ghosts walking around in this park.
One woman who frequents Trowbridge Falls is now reconsidering her daily jogging routine. Early one Saturday morning, during her regular daily run, she felt an evil presence, as though she were being stalked. A shiver ran up her spine. She continued with her jog, hoping this unsettling feeling would go away, but it only got worse. The jogger was shocked to see a spirit appear, and then another. The woman froze with terror. She bowed her head, tensed her body, and braced herself. As quickly as it had come, the uneasy feeling disappeared. The jogger quickly left, terribly frightened and more than a little shaken. Trowbridge Falls and its surrounding area are also a popular place for young lovers to meet, although some rendezvous turn into affairs they prefer not to remember. One evening, a couple drove to the park's campground for a romantic getaway. They shut the car off and began to talk. As the two continued their conversation, they heard and felt a thump on the outside of the car. They chose to ignore it. Soon after came a second thump, which they also ignored. The car began to shake. Thumps from outside the vehicle grew louder, as if someone or thing was hitting the car over and over again. The two were trapped in the car. Then suddenly the disturbance subsided. Fear gripped the couple, and rather than investigate what had happened, they made a quick exit from the park. Could the many tragic accidents which have occurred over the years be what keeps these thrill-seeking spirits lingering here, playing mischievous games with visitors, and searching for eternal excitement on the shores of Trowbridge Falls? An employee who regularly conducted tours of the courthouse came in early to make sure everything was in order for the day's groups. Little did she know that the day that had begun like any other would not end that way. As she checked the main area of the courthouse, she thought she heard a loud banging coming from the bathroom. A moment later, the noise stopped. Again, the banging sound returned. This time, she was sure of it. She rushed over to the area where the eerie noise was coming from, but saw nothing.
This grand old courthouse in St. Andrews by the Sea, New Brunswick, stands as a monument to Canada's harsh judicial past. This particular court was one of the last Canadian courts to execute prisoners by hanging, and it seems as though one of the hanged has returned.
The spirit that dwells within the halls of the Charlotte County Courthouse is suspected to be Thomas Hutchings, a convicted murderer from years past. Thomas's tale began when he offered to walk a woman home after a midday social gathering. The two stopped in a clearing, and Thomas made advances towards the woman. True to her virtue, she pushed Thomas away. He became infuriated. This was the last time the woman was seen alive. Thomas was charged with murder and was to be tried in this very courthouse. He awaited his verdict and was found guilty. Thomas was sentenced to death by hanging and would become the last criminal in Canada's history to be subjected to such harsh punishment. When the group arrived, the tour guide led them around the courthouse, explaining various aspects of Canada's judicial history. One visitor decided to stay behind, wanting to explore this fascinating place on his own. He could not have anticipated what he found. As the group continued their tour, another visitor stopped to admire some old photos hanging on the wall. Suddenly, a handprint appeared on the velvet. Terrified, the woman left the building, unable to continue the tour.
This particular building, our Charlotte County Courthouse, I do believe very strongly to be haunted by him. I don't have any proof that it is him, but the funny thing is, when we talk about him, different things will happen in this building.
No one thought anything of the diminishing numbers of the group, assuming the others had preoccupied themselves in other parts of the courthouse. The tour continued into the building's archives. An elderly gentleman lagged behind to review some old city maps by himself. But his concentration was broken when he heard footsteps above him. He was in fact not alone. Frightened, the gentleman fled the building. Outside, he saw the missing members of the tour group standing some distance away from the courthouse. Each one had a different story to tell about their encounter with the spirit of Thomas Hutchings. This particular tour had become one they would never forget. The Charlotte County Courthouse in New Brunswick is still a working courthouse. However, tours are made available to those who wish to explore this historic building. Perhaps the long-dead Thomas Hutchings roams the courthouse seeking either justice or revenge. We may never know. But those who encounter him never forget their tour of this wonderful place. In Lake Manitoba, near Manapogo Beach, something very unusual lives beneath the waters. An artist planned to spend the day at the beach, but her agenda would soon be altered after having a hair-raising encounter with a local legend. She placed her beach blanket on the ground and began to sketch. Soon, she could no longer resist the inviting waters. As she swam, it seemed as if something was following her. Then, just as she raised her head out of the water, she saw Manapogo, the legendary lake monster of Manapogo Beach. Frantically, she swam from the creature, but it pursued her relentlessly. Swimming even harder, she eventually lost the monster, or it simply gave up. Picking up her belongings, she left Manapogo Beach, leaving behind the mysterious water creature.
Sea creatures, sea serpents, and gigantic lake monsters exist as unresolved global phenomena. While sightings of these mythical aquatic creatures are scarce, Lake Winnipeg's Manapogo has been seen emerging from its pristine waters on many occasions.
We were out fishing in the Manapogo lake. The water was calm, and there I heard a noise. And I said to my husband, "What the heck is that?" He turned around and looked, and we seen this great big wave of water. When it got just about across from us, I could see this pole, looked like a pole, and it looked like a horse's head on it. It was going towards the beach where the kids always swims. It got close to the beach where the water got shallow, and it went down, and we never seen it again. Then we got talking to somebody, people from Manapogo there, and I forget what his name was. Like, he'd take care of the grounds there. And he turned around and he said this thing had been seen before there. And they called it the Manapogo.
Over the years, many witnesses have seen this frightening creature. As a young man walked along the beach, he stopped to skip stones, but his pastime disturbed something in the water. The young man could not believe what he was seeing. As the Manapogo surfaced, he fled to tell the authorities of what he had just witnessed.
Manapogo is part of the tradition and the history of that region of Manitoba. The area where Lake Winnipegosis blends with Lake Manitoba has been host to many sightings of the lake monster. The pin of the municipality has logo Manapogo on it. Manapogo is now the name of the provincial park, a very beautiful beach and region for camping and spending the summer. In fact, you can go up to the beach and campground during the summer and at the concession stand get a Manapogo burger.
A local fisherman who had often come to the lake had heard about the legend of the Manapogo, but never took it seriously until this day. He loaded his canoe with his fishing gear and set out onto the water. As he prepared his fishing rod, he saw something stir in the water, something he had never seen before. He quickly reached for his camera and proceeded to take a picture. However, it seemed that the Manapogo wished to keep its mystique and swam towards the fisherman's canoe to startle him. Frightened, the fisherman's first reaction was to drop his camera and try to ward off the oncoming lake monster with his oar. The fisherman felt a retreat was in order and furiously paddled away from the creature. This unsuspecting fisherman now had a new tale of how he was the one that got away.
In the 1960s, there was actually a government-funded expedition to try and locate the Manapogo monster. This was spurred in part by the research of a zoologist named Dr. McLeod, who believed there was enough circumstantial evidence and some partial bones and other evidence that suggested a large creature did in fact exist in the lake. And through the cooperation of the Manitoba Department of Trades, was taking individuals into the lake to look for it, and they spent a number of weeks combing the lake for definite evidence and definite proof. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything. So although we had enough evidence to warrant a provincial investigation by the government, nothing was seen and the matter was dropped.
A scout of the lake proved unsuccessful for zoologists and fishermen. They did not see the Manapogo that day. But be prepared when visiting Manitoba's Lake Manapogo to keep a camera close and running shoes closer. Edward Hopkins left Ontario in 1882 and migrated west, settling in Moose Jaw. Edward was elected to the House of Commons and helped establish schools and churches in his community. In 1889, Edward Hopkins married Miss Minnie Latham and built this remarkable home for her in the heart of the city. A couple came to the Hopkins Dining Parlor in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan to enjoy a relaxing meal. A candle was lit for ambience and the mood was set. As the couple looked over the menu, the young woman saw something out of the corner of her eye. But it became difficult for the couple to relax with their meal after they witnessed an apparition. Hopkins Dining Parlor is one of Moose Jaw's most paranormally active locations.
Built in 1905, Hopkins Dining Parlor in Moose Jaw is one of Saskatchewan's most unique restaurants. With its ambient Victorian decor, antique furnishings, great prime rib, and delicious seafood, most patrons continue to come back, and some have never left.
Some years later, Minnie died, and her funeral was actually held in the Hopkins family home. And to this day, it seems she has never left her beloved house.
Hi, my name is Gladys Pierce, and I'm the owner of Hopkins Dining Parlor here in Moose Jaw. We changed it to a restaurant in '79, and it's a beautiful old house, even if there is a ghost in it. Many things have happened here that are quite strange. I have heard footsteps many times, and when I hear the footsteps and I'm alone here, I try not to go up to see what it is. I just accept that there is a ghost here. I believe it's Mrs. Hopkins.
One of the restaurant's chefs arrived at the Hopkins Dining Parlor early to open up. And as usual, she headed into the kitchen to begin the day's preparations. The chef prepared the daily specials, making sure everything was perfect. She thought she heard a noise from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps. She was certain that she heard the sound of footsteps. However, as soon as she left the kitchen, they stopped. Returning to her preparations, she heard the footsteps a second time. But she was determined to locate the source of the sound. She did, seeing for the first time the ghost of Minnie Hopkins.
Footsteps are heard. Actually, a lot of times in the daytime we hear them up here, walking across the floors. Some of the experiences the employees have had is they have seen a woman in the downstairs washroom.
This old building has been home to a great many eerie occurrences. In a single evening, it's not unusual for one to have several encounters with the unexplainable. Many claim that you can see Minnie wandering from room to room of this, her former and perhaps eternal home. And some say you may even hear her playing the piano in one of the Hopkins dining rooms. Hopkins Dining Parlor was once the home of Edward and Minnie Hopkins. Today, patrons come for more than just the great food. On top of catching a glimpse of Minnie's ghost, many guests have been entertained by her piano playing as well, some 60 years after her death.